What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you are looking forward to the final preseason game of the year for the Dallas Cowboys this Sunday. America's team will take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. It is the last step in the preseason, the final hurdle to climb before the regular season. Obviously, there's a bye week next week, but there are other things that have been happening, that are other checkpoints that have been being crossed, so to speak. And one of those has been roster decisions. Last Tuesday, we came here on the channel. By the way, please subscribe to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel to discuss how the Cowboys were cutting their roster from 90 to 85 players, which is something the entire NFL had to do last Tuesday. Well, this Tuesday, every single team in the NFL had to trim their roster from 85 to 80 players. And by the way, next Tuesday, every team in the NFL has to get down to 53 players on their roster. That will hardly be the final 53-man roster because lots of other procedures will happen. Some players being put on IR across the league, players being cut and signed back, etc. It is a hectic time. We will be here live on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel next Tuesday, starting at 2 p.m. Central Time for a live roster reaction discussion. So make sure you do join us then. But in the meantime, the Cowboys, like every team in the NFL, as mentioned, did have to get down to 80 players today on Tuesday. Now, you will recall that last week the Cowboys were a little creative with how they got from 90 to 85 players, putting some players on injured reserve outright and applying the waived injured designation to others to stash them on IR for the future as well. This week brought with it, so far early on, a unique set of circumstances for the Cowboys in their quest to get down to 80 players. And so they are now at 80 players on their roster. But as mentioned, it has been a bit of a unique path for them to get here. Now, you will remember that last Saturday, as the Cowboys preseason game against the Houston Texans was just beginning, that we found out that defensive coordinator Dan Quinn and defensive lineman Carlos Watkins were both people who left the stadium early in terms of being overly precautious, an abundance of caution with regards to COVID-19 and the NFL's protocols. We found out on Monday that the Dallas Cowboys added 3 more players to their reserve COVID-19 list, and they are now at 4 players in totality. The Cowboys have defensive lineman Carlos Watkins, you knew that already, wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, and safeties Malik Hooker and Israel Mukuamu. I think these are all players who were safe to make the Cowboys 53-man roster, as mentioned. Mukuamu is probably the most touchy. By the way, he is on my personal 53-man roster, and we will be discussing that, a 53-man roster projection later on this week, over the weekend as the Cowboys game ends. We will release that video for you as well here on the channel. And obviously Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator, but he does not count against the overall player pool and the 80-man limit that every NFL team has. That goes without saying. But because of these 4 players being on the reserve COVID-19 list, they do not count against the roster from a numerical standpoint. So while the Cowboys began this week with 85 players on their roster, in terms of the rules and the procedures that the NFL has at present moment, or rather when these players were put on the COVID list, the Cowboys immediately went down to 81 in that particular sense. Again, obviously these players are still part of the team. But so that meant that the Cowboys only technically had to release 1 player, move on from 1 player to get down to the mandated 80-man limit. If the Cowboys are able to bring any of these players back once they are out of the COVID protocol, they'll have to make a corresponding move. What goes up must come down. But 1 final player had to come down on Tuesday, and it is a kicker that the Cowboys brought in last week. Lirim Hajrullahu was the last player that the Cowboys moved on from to get down to the 80-man limit. While we don't ever celebrate or root for players to get cut or waived or anything negative like that, this is a very positive sign for kicker Greg Zuerlein. It suggests that he is well on his path to recovery. The Cowboys have been very positive about this for a long time now. It certainly seems like Zuerlein is on track to start week 1 and play and kick in week 1 against Tampa Bay. And I would imagine that we probably do see him on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. We have not really seen Zuerlein so far this season, this preseason period, that is. So very exciting news that he is doing well. All the best to Lirim wherever his NFL journey takes him. So the Cowboys now at 80 players on their roster, but the COVID issue is one that is obviously going to be prevalent for a little bit of time here. It's going to be prevalent for a while, you would seem to think. But with regards to their current roster, the current construct of it, and the Cowboys actually dealt with an issue regarding the COVID protocols again on Tuesday. On Tuesday, the Dallas Cowboys, and we'll get to this in just a moment, saw safety Donovan Wilson leave practice early with trainer Jim Maurer. But the Cowboys also saw safety DAMONTAE KAZEE absent from the start of practice out of an abundance of caution, again, with regards to the COVID protocol. So DAMONTAE KAZEE, who is at the time of this recording at least not on the reserve COVID-19 list, someone who was held out. And we've seen this happen, obviously, over the course of the last year now, not just in the NFL, but in other sports. players that play similar positions or in similar groups, whatever the sport tends to be, are sometimes deemed close contacts, and it therefore makes sense that the Cowboys would be overly cautious, overly protective, exercise the abundance of caution with DAMONTAE, KAZEE. But again, right now it does seem like all is well there. Now, we talked about Donovan Wilson, who left practice early, and for a little bit of time on Tuesday, it seemed like this also had to do with the COVID protocol, because again, if you look at things, the Cowboys obviously have Israel Mukuamu and Malik Hooker in the COVID protocol. They are both safeties. DAMONTAE, KAZEE, a safety. Donovan Wilson, a safety. So it seemed like that was the case. That was the situation surrounding Donovan Wilson. However, ultimately, it was revealed that the situation regarding Donovan Wilson is a groin injury right now. So doesn't seem like it's a serious thing. And ultimately, there are still, 16 days until the regular season opener between the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. So not exactly a reason to panic if you are worried about Donovan Wilson. But the Cowboys are really short at the safety position this week because of the fact that they do have two in the COVID protocol in Israel Mukuamu and Malik Hooker. DAMONTAE, KAZEE obviously was somebody who was held out early on Tuesday. Donovan Wilson left practice early on Tuesday. So Tuesday was a day that saw Jaron Kearse and Darian Thompson work at safety for the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are kind of deep at safety, deeper than usual or deeper than they've usually been. And so they do have a number of options at the very least, but still, it is a stark reminder and how quickly things can change for you in terms of today's NFL, today's world with regards to the COVID protocols. If this was a regular season week, obviously it would be Tuesday. The Cowboys would be getting ready to start practice on Wednesday, the very next day. And who knows what the situation would be with all these players out. It was revealed that the Cowboys do have 93% vaccination among players, and they do have 100% vaccination among the football staff. So, make of that what you will. But this is something that is seemingly not going away, seemingly going to be an issue all season long, and the Cowboys are dealing with it right now, and hopefully everything sorts itself out when it's all said and done. So as mentioned, the Cowboys now at 80 players on their roster, but again, 4 players are in the COVID protocol. The moment that those players can come out, the Cowboys will obviously elevate them back to the regular roster, and they will seemingly release somebody else, waive somebody else, whatever the case may be, to make room for them. It remains to be seen when these players are going to be able to come out of the COVID protocol. If they're going to be able to come out before the preseason game against Jacksonville, I don't think CeeDee Lamb is somebody that's going to play against Jacksonville. You can certainly make a case as to whether or not Carlos Watkins or Malik Hooker would play against Jacksonville. I think Israel Mukuamu, if he wasn't in the protocol, would definitely play against Jacksonville. And you can make an argument that Israel Mukuamu might need the game against Jacksonville to make his total case to make the 53-man roster in totality. Like I said, my own personal 53-man roster, he's safe and he doesn't need that game. But that argument, that conversation can go a number of different ways. So those four in the protocol took the Cowboys down to 81. And then Lirim Hajrullahu is the final player who the Cowboys moved on from, the only player who the Cowboys moved on from to get down to 80. And in fact, the Cowboys haven't really had to say goodbye to a lot of people because they placed Shewo Olinenua, they placed Reggie Robinson on injured reserve last week. They placed Anthony Hines. They gave him the waived injured designation. He was not claimed on waivers. He reverted back to injured reserve. They gave the same designation to Hunter Nicewander, who was handling the kicking duties before Lirim. He also cleared waivers and also reverted to injured reserve. So that is 4 people of the 10 cuts the Cowboys have technically had to make that they have ultimately kept onto. And then when you factor in the fact that the Cowboys have 4 players in the COVID protocol, that means through 10 total roster cuts, which is the literal requirement right now from the NFL. The Cowboys have only really had to move on from 2 players. The circumstances have presented themselves in this way. Obviously, this was not a predictable thing, but the Cowboys have had to adjust, which is just life in the NFL these days. So, as mentioned, we will have a 53-man roster prediction for you later on this weekend here on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel, and we will be live for the final hour of roster cutdowns, and we will react to the Cowboys 53-man roster being set. But as mentioned, there will be a lot of changes next week. It's possible the Cowboys or other teams in the NFL will carry a player only to put them on injured reserve. There will be a lot of jump roping players who they cut that they bring back. They might bring in somebody who was cut by a different team, maybe a backup quarterback. Lots of things to still figure out in the coming weeks. So make sure you are staying tuned right here to the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. Please do subscribe. Make sure to check out blogontheboys.com and also subscribe to the Blog on the Boys podcast network. We do have an episode that goes out every single day because we know that there is always Dallas Cowboys news to discuss. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa. You can also shoot me an email, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com, if that is more your speed. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to join us. We'll see you next time.